you wanted the best, you've got the best podcast, the hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
I'm Chris Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. There you go. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. We certainly appreciate you guys being here. As always, the Chris Voss Show is the family that loves you but doesn't judge you, at least not as harshly as your mother-in-law. And that's why you love us, because we love you in spite of all your flaws and issues and you know, some of you in the back, I've seen a lot of your issues. I'm just teasing. We love everybody. As always, refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives. Help spread the word and the love and the knowledge of helping people improve the quality of their lives. The Chris Voss Show and the great authors and minds we have on the show, none of which are me. I'm just the idiot with the mic. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, the big LinkedIn newsletter, the 130,000 LinkedIn group over there as well. Chris Voss Facebook and Chris Voss 1 on the TikTokity. For 15 years, we bring in the CEOs, the billionaires, the White House presidential advisors, the Pulitzer Prize winners, all the people who bring their amazing stories that you can help learn in life, or at least they're fun and educating as well. Today, we have an amazing author on the show. We'll be talking about his latest book that just came out, November 7th, 2023. It is called Pirate Cove, an insider's account of the infamous Southport Lane scandal. Richard D. Bailey joins us on the show today. He'll be talking to us about this amazing story that he uncovered and take you through all the sorts of different things that go on with. We'll just get into the book, and then he'll be able to tell you. I'll keep you in suspense. How about that? He is the author of Pirate Cove, released by Bancroft, if I can learn how to spell today, Bancroft Press in November 2023. For 30 years, he's been providing interim and long-term management and corporate development services to distressed public and private manufacturing, service, and distribution companies. In 2013, he was hired by Southport Lane Management, a New York-based private equity firm. Shortly after he was hired, he noticed unusual cash transfers by and between Southport-owned controlled LLCs. Upon further investigation, he uncovered critical evidence of what would turn out to be $350 million in fraud. Will they take a check? He then closely worked with FBI investigators for several years, resulted in 4 indictments and 4 guilty pleas. 3 of the perpetrators served prison time. In late October 2021, the leader of the fraud committed suicide prior to being sentenced. As a result, with millions unaccounted for in the eyes of the law, he died an innocent man. His book, Pirate Cove, is a true story of a fake Caravaggio?
Fake Caravaggio, yep.
Caravaggio. I just learned a new word today. This is why we do the show. A bonus Yale degree, a 26-year-old self-proclaimed genius in the unraveling of $350 million in fraud. He holds a BA from Providence College and an MA from Fairfield University. Welcome to the show, Richard. How are you?
I'm well, Chris. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for coming. Boy, we've laid out a whole show here of interesting fun and this sounds like FTX Junior going on over here with what you guys had going on. So give us .coms. Where do you want people to find you on the interwebs?
First of all, you can find me on rdbailey, BAILEY.com. My Twitter handle is _RDB lowercase _.
There you go.
Yeah, _ Bailey. I'm sorry, I forgot about it.
We have to have the .com part, otherwise, you know. It could be
I know. It's Twitter, you know.
Oh, that's true. Huh?
It's RDB _ RD Bailey. So
there you go. Give us a 30,000 overview. We kind of led into it, but people want to hear it from your voice. Tell us a little bit about the inside of this book.
Okay. You know, I was once told, I read once somewhere, that the crux of a good story is you throw an ordinary schmuck, which would be me in this case, into an extraordinary circumstance and see what happens.
My life in this podcast.
You know, in 2013, I was hired by a private equity firm named Southport Lane, as you mentioned, and they first sent me to a pharmaceutical company in northern New Jersey to do some due diligence on an investment they were going to make. I came back and they were not very good at private equity investing. And I came back and the 26-year-old prodigy said, should I buy this company? And I said, no. And he just looked at me strangely. And I said, he goes, why? I said, because you're going to lose all your money. So they hired me to run this very struggling, financially insecure vineyard out on Long Island called Lieb Cellars that they had, that was worth about $5.7 million, and they paid $12.75 million cash. So I got back to the point, these guys weren't very good at this. I start running the company, and I start noticing that there is, cash transfers that make no sense, large sums of money coming in, going out, and it's like, okay, now what do I do? And ultimately, I went and figured the whole fraud out. And then to jump to the middle of the end, I went to the FBI. I wound up with the FBI. That was a circuitous route as well. Mm-hmm. And I wore a wire and stuck cameras into meetings, and everything. Everybody got arrested except me, thank God.
Yeah.
And the companies went away.
This is crazy, man. This is a crazy.
It's
story.
true. It was on the front page of the Wall Street Journal too.
There you go. People can Google it, pull it up. We're going to delve into the book. Let's get a little bit on you and your background. People like to know who you are and get sold on you too as well. Tell us how what were some of your journeys that got you down this road, got you into this situation?
I did what's called workouts and turnarounds for about 30 plus years. Mm-hmm. Now, no one grows up wanting to do workouts and turnarounds in corporate. I mean, it just doesn't happen that way, and you don't do it until you realize that you're in one. I got a job at the end of the 80s at a steel mill out in Western Pennsylvania. It was a classic 80s LBO. It was worth $6 million. They paid $8 million, borrowed $10 million. And in 1991, it was in bankruptcy.
Oh, wow.
And, that was kind of fun for me because I liked the pace of the bankruptcy and, trying to figure out, and trying to make people happy. Try to, sit there and do deals and things like that in order to sit there and just get yourself to payroll this next Friday. So I spent a lot of years doing stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So when I was contacted by Southport Lane, the guy, the president of Southport Lane, who was not involved in any of the criminal activity, was a close friend of mine for about 20 years. And he said, this vineyard's a mess. And I was like, okay. And, I said, that doesn't scare me. I said, but, I don't know anything about farming and, wine and agriculture and things like that. And, he was like, if you want to get paid, you do now, So no, I literally spent a lot of years just, fixing other people's problems, corporate problems. Sometimes that means, putting Humpty Dumpty back together again. Sometimes you can do it and you can make a lot of money doing it. Sometimes, you find a company that just doesn't deserve to live. And you perform the last rites, bust it up, and sell off everything, and just let it go its own way.
Hopefully,
so that's what that's it. There's a lot of people that make an awful lot of money doing it for the big companies,
cutting it up, and putting it in pieces, selling off the pieces. And stuff. You should probably hit up next is that Sports Illustrated. Evidently, it's kind of funny.
I know they're just laying everybody off. Yeah, I mean that's pretty.
I guess the name of Sports Illustrated is owned by two firms that owned it, and whoever's running Sports Illustrated or leasing the name didn't make their payment. So the two firms said, "Nah, we'll take that right back from you." And then once you take the name Sports Illustrated back, it's kind of like
you got nothing. At that point. Yeah.
I mean, you could probably, borrow the Kmart name, but that probably doesn't work for your brand.
For Kodak, something Kodak, like that.
Kodak, there you go. At least that's second. I think everyone leases Kodak. My dogs lease the Kodak name. I've seen that slapped on so many different things. Let's delve back into the book as we go. Is this the first book you've ever written?
It is. There you go. My 95-year-old mother, after all was said and done in 2018, she was probably 90. She was 90 at the time. I sat down and told her the story, and she was an old school teacher, and she looks at me and she just says, "Write it down. This is a great story." So I did. I started writing like one chapter a week, and it was kind of difficult because not that the writing part wasn't difficult, but I didn't really have an overarching there was no ending to the story at this point, and so I was writing it down. So I decided to do it on Substack. So I serialized it on Substack. So I would sit there and send out one chapter a week.
Mm-hmm.
And next thing you know, people start finding it, subscribing. I built up a little following on Substack. And when I took a couple weeks off, and this would have been in 2020, I took a couple weeks off writing it, and and people started calling me and emailing me saying, what happened? I want to read the next chapter. So that kind of spurred me into doing it. What I couldn't tell them at the time is I was negotiating with the FBI on certain things that I could say and couldn't say, because I did some undercover work for them, obviously. I did that. And finally, in October of 2021, I was literally driving home from Home Depot because we had lost power here where I live in south of Boston. And I bought some wood for our wood stove, and the phone rings, and it's the lead agent for the FBI, who, when you work for the FBI in a situation like this, you actually get very, very close with that person, because they sit there and they walk you through some difficult times. Why am I doing this? How can I do this? What happens if, these people find out? And so he called me and he just said, hey, I just want to give you a heads up. And I said, okay, about what? And first of all, this guy never called me directly. For 3.5 years, undercover activity, everything started with a text first. You got time for a call.
Meet us here or something like that.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Yeah. And so I sit there and the phone just rings and it's his name. And I go, okay, what's going on? And he goes, Alex Burns just killed himself. Now he was the 26-year-old mastermind of this $350 million fraud. And my response was, typically profane. But then, I sat there and said, okay, that's kind of the end of this story. And he said, yep. And even the FBI agent said, you can finish the book now. You have an ending.
Oh, you have an wow.
So
that's one way. That's one way you get an ending.
Yeah, I didn't see that one coming, put it that way.
There you go. Wall Street Journal covered this, the collapse of Southport Lane's insurance empire. So tell us about this young man. Is he the key figure in this, where he's
he is.
Was my comparison to like a FTX Junior sort of the same sort of proponents that were going on here? This money was disappearing too.
It was phenomenally close because there seemed to be very similar personalities.
Oh, really?
Alex was very, very smart, no doubt about it, but he wasn't smart enough to kind of connect the dots on all his crazy ideas and sit there and, and if it was his idea, it was therefore a brilliant idea because of course he was brilliant and he would be the first person to tell you that on a number of occasions. He said, I am Richard. I am always the smartest person in the room.
Really? Wow. When you're saying that's
you just got you just got to be kind of, stupid to say that, something like that. He was very similar. In what I was reading about Sam Bankman-Fried, they were very good about going out and basically, convincing people that they were, financial prodigies, that they understood things, a new way of doing things that nobody else did because it had never been done before, and therefore prying money out of a lot of people. In Alex's case, he bought 4 insurance companies, and at one point he was bragging of having over $5 billion in money to invest.
Wow.
At 26.
Wow. There you go. Note to self, quit saying I'm the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
And so he raises a fund, I guess, from investors to raise the money to buy these things?
No, he didn't. Here's the interesting thing. They just took a different path altogether. They found some insurance companies that, were not in best financial health, and they convinced the insurance regulators and the insurance companies' owners, equity holders, to sell the companies to them.
Oh, wow.
So how do they buy the insurance companies? They literally printed stock certificates in their office. All right. They created, this is no bull. They created another company, all right, with different names and things like that, which would give an opinion as to the value of the securities they just created on their office printer. And then they sent those certificates into a very large bank here in the United States. That bank signed off and said, yep, that's $50 million based upon, and they used that money, that $50 million, they put that on the balance sheet of the company. So that was the purchase price. And then what happens is, you've got, and here was the real reason they did all this. You get into an insurance company, even a distressed insurance company, and they're going to have an awful lot of cash that just cycles through on a monthly basis because, people pay their premiums, they pay out, the claims, and it's just it just rains money in those businesses. They had the extra, so they created another set of securities, of bogus securities, and sold those to the insurance company they owned.
Holy shit.
And sat there and took that money out. And that's how they bought the vineyard.
So and why were they buying a vineyard? The guy's just insane, right?
Alex liked wine, and it was owned by a pretty well-known hedge fund manager, and he liked being, wanted to show him that he had, money and, and financial chops too. And, and also it had a beautiful 8,000 square foot Nantucket shingle style house in the middle of the vineyard, so it was the gorgeous assets out on the east end of Long Island on the North Fork in a town called Cutchogue, just simply gorgeous. I mean, the big, beautiful house, and it's surrounded by 46 acres of vineyard.
So this thing's just a huge, giant paper float, really.
That's all
it comes down to it, right?
Yeah.
And you notice that money was exiting the company. Was it going to shell companies? Was it going to the guy?
Oh yeah, no, it was going a lot of different directions. When I started asking questions, okay, what's this transfer for? What's this for? Mm-hmm. I asked one of the attorneys at Southport who sent me the bank statements for the account that was paying all the vineyard's bills. And that I looked at those. On November 1st, 2012, $18.1 million came in. All right. The next morning, $3 million went out the side door to something called Southport Specialty Finance, which no one knows where that money went. Mm-hmm. And $12.75 million ultimately went to the sellers of the vineyard. And, so when I walked into the vineyard, it was, owned free and clear. No mortgage, no nothing. Also was losing, not only did he overpay by $5.75 million, or almost 100% overpayment, but it was losing money hand over fist.
Wow.
So they massively overpaid for this asset for the privilege of losing a shitload of money every year. So my job was to go in there and fix it. And when I fixed it, and I did fix it when it was still there. When I left in 2018, it was profitable and making a lot more money, and it's still out there doing well.
There you go. This would be a great movie because there's a lot of these great movies. I'm thinking of the cigarette movie where the one guy goes undercover, I think it was, and stuff. So what makes you reach the point where you're like, hey, I'm not going down with this ship? Or was that your thought process? I need to reach out to the FBI.
That was exactly my thought process. Right. You kind of put your finger on it very well. There comes a time when you sit there and go, okay, I had figured out that they had committed a felony, at least one that I knew. So I wound up going to a friend of mine who is a private investigator in New York. You may have heard of him. His name is Bo Dietl. He's also a fairly famous actor. And, he arrested John Gotti and all those kind of, so he was, really involved in all those guys. So I went to his private investigation firm and we went over it for a couple of weeks. They said, absolutely federal crime taking place. Believe it or not, they tried to call the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Manhattan. They waved them off, and said, listen, we don't want this case. And that's when they sat there and said, they looked at me and they said, this has to be a federal case run out of Washington.
Wow.
So the next step in that journey is, okay, how do I get to them? How do I find out who's running this show, this criminal investigation? If there is a criminal investigation, I just still don't know if there is or not.
Oh, okay.
We hire, Bo Dietl recommends an attorney in New Jersey, Michael Weinstein, who becomes as close to a brother as I've ever had. I do have a brother, but Michael's my second brother. And Michael is a criminal defense attorney. So here I am, by the way, I haven't done anything wrong and I'm hiring a criminal defense attorney. So I mean, there's, you start to, this is where the road starts to go apart, and you start to realize that this is what's going on is crazy.
Yeah.
So
This might be life changing. I mean,
yeah, pretty much was.
Yeah. When you reach out to the FBI, I think that's got to be like, because the FBI is going to check you out too, right? Because they want to.
They did. They did.
They my understanding of when you reach out to them is, they're going to do their due diligence on you and try and figure out, if the story is right, if they're getting, a bum lead or whatever.
I'll get into that because it's actually kind of funny. The first meeting, Michael is, he's a pretty smooth, silver-tongued criminal defense attorney. He's used to seeing his clients in handcuffs, and you can't ruffle his feathers too much. All right.
Yeah.
But he's also a former U.S. attorney or assistant U.S. attorney in Washington, D.C. So he understands the pipeline in there.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there, and this is a moment I'll never forget. I'm in my car. Because I live south of Boston. The only way to get out to Long Island every week is through a ferry that between New London and Orient Point, Long Island. So I'm about to get on the ferry to come home on a Thursday. Phone rings. It's Michael Weinstein. Hey, Michael. And, Mr. Smooth and sleek and urbane suddenly goes, holy shit. He goes, are you sitting down? I said, I'm in my car. I'm driving. And he goes, I just got off the phone. There is a whole task force in Main Justice in Washington investigating Southport. It's SEC, FBI, and the CFTC. And it's being run by attorneys in D.C. And I just told him, I just got off the phone with the lead FBI agent, and he wants to talk to you. I'm like, okay, that's kind of what we're here for.
So this is a good thing that you turned state's evidence or federal evidence.
Well, I hadn't done it yet,
okay.
But I was.
It was a good thing.
Listen, okay, so silly and stupid me, I am convinced that I hand these papers off to the FBI. I turn around, walk away. My bit's done. I've never been involved in criminal stuff before. I don't know how that works.
Yeah.
Weinstein sits there and goes, Richard, they have one question for you. And I said, what's that? Will you wear a wire? And I never saw that coming, Chris. Never. Really? So never contemplated it, nothing.
Wow.
Completely caught me off guard. I get up and there's actually a bar on these ferries. And I sat there and I had a drink and I was thinking about it. And I'm like, oh, God, I'm going to go home. And now I've got to do the one thing I hadn't really done yet. I hadn't told my wife about all this crazy stuff.
I was just going to ask as the next question. Were you married, and what would your wife think?
Yeah, married with two sons. One was in high school and, getting ready to go to college. And, and frankly, I wanted to keep the job because it paid really well. I'm not going to, I'm no, angel. I mean, it paid really well. Being a CEO of this little company, once we got it fixed, life was good. So we set up a meeting to go and meet with the FBI. Now, anybody who knows me know that when I get nervous, I get like the flop sweats, for like 10 minutes before I'm in a meeting and things like that. It's embarrassing as hell, but I can't help it.
Well, I mean, this is a big deal, man. You're walking. I mean, the FBI we've had FBI agents on. It's a big deal,
Oh yeah. The meeting's at 1:00. Michael Weinstein says, get to my office at 12:30. And for half an hour, he's telling me, you haven't done anything wrong. They're on your side. And he's handing me glasses of ice water to get me to stop sweating. Which somehow I figured he had done before being a criminal defense attorney. Uh-huh. At the stroke of 1:00, in walks two FBI agents and a guy from the Securities Exchange Commission Criminal Investigation Division. And we start the interview. And, the first thing they do, they pull out their badges and things like that. Mm-hmm. And, understand by this point, I've got bank records. I've got QuickBook files that I've put together. I've got everything. I've got it all lined up. I know which laws that I think they've broken at the time, but I don't, and Bo Dietl had said yes, Mike Weinstein had said yes, but I hadn't heard anybody on the prosecution side or anybody on the side of law enforcement sit there and say, yeah, this is a crime.
Wow.
So we go through we actually spend about 4 hours. And the first 2 hours, they're talking, they're asking me questions. I'm showing them the evidence that I had. And by the way, I'm not nervous. I've stopped perspiring. So we're sitting there, so then they come through, they get up and they walk out. They say, we're going to come back in a minute. And they had slipped a piece of paper over to Michael Weinstein to look at. And it was, what's called a proffer letter, but it has me listed as the defendant. And I'm going, I'm not signing that. I'm not a defendant. I'm not a target in this. Then I'm going, am I? And I start sweating again.
I mean, they kind of sweep up everybody when they do.
And you want to know something, Chris? That was part of my driving fear the whole time long. I didn't want to be on the wrong side of this.
Yeah, if you're not on the right side,
it was going to go bad.
You're just going to pick up everybody and
yeah.
And just to fall back to something, what did do you want to tell us what your wife thought, or do you want to reserve that for people who read the book?
No, I'll tell you. She is she's pretty amazing. She looks at me and she's seen me, be in pretty tough corporate situations before. Mm-hmm. And she looks at me and she says, I just want to know, do you know what you're doing? And I'm like, absolutely. Bullface lie. I had the faintest idea what I was doing.
It's not like you'd ever been, a witness wire for the FBI before.
Yeah. And then she goes, I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to say no because I can tell you've already made up your mind. And I went, I have. And she goes, just be careful.
Yeah.
Just be careful.
You have to worry about your family and kids. I mean, at least it's not the mob, but anybody can do anything if you threaten their.
There's that, there is that, kind of fear in the background, but you deal with that. And honestly, I came to the conclusion, and I hope this doesn't come home to bite me. I came to the conclusion that these aren't the kind of guys who show up at your door with a shotgun.
Yeah.
So I mean, and two have gotten out of prison. Obviously, Alex Burns, the mastermind, killed himself. One gets out of prison in a few months, and I just don't think that that's the case. That's going to be the case.
Yeah.
These aren't bad people. They just got greedy and said, the heck with the rules. Yeah. Nobody and they did the thing that happens so often. I've seen so many times working in finance. They said nobody will know.
They really said that?
Oh God, yeah. Wow. I've heard that 1,000 times in finance.
And
nobody will know if we'll cut this rule.
And reading the justice.gov's website on this, their announcements of arrests and stuff, I guess they'd stolen so much money, the insurance company wasn't able to pay the policy holder claim. So there you start really having some real fraud, and it starts hurting people's lives.
It does hurt people's lives. As a matter of fact, that's what the lead FBI agent told me the first time we met. One of the things he said was, insurance fraud isn't a victimless crime. Yeah. He said, what happens is you've got people who have paid their monthly premiums for years and years and years. Now they've got to make a claim. The insurance company has no money. So who has to make up for that? The individual states. Individual states have to pay those insurance claims. Yep. Interestingly enough, this fraud, again, it turned out to be $350 million, but it was also affected 39 states.
Yeah. So I want to leave something in the, a lot of this in the book so we can just entice people to do it. But what did you decide on the proffer agreement? Because I know the proffer agreement, you have to tell any and all crimes you may have committed or any sort of activities you may have done that may have been bad. I mean, you have to flesh out your whole life because you do. Yeah.
You do. And, I was very sure I had done nothing with respect to all of this. I mean, I've been in the securities business, in the corporate finance business for, that's part of being in the workouts and turnaround business, and, I have probably been close to things that were, if not criminal, then civil liabilities, a dozen times, but I've always managed to keep myself out of it. And, one of the things, and I talk to my kids about this, my two sons, and I'll sit there and say, here's the thing. When you get in these situations, the best thing I got to tell you is stick to your principles, but you got to understand your principles are expensive.
Yeah.
Most people will just put their head down, say, I see nothing, to do the Sergeant Schultz thing. I see nothing, I hear nothing, I say nothing. And, but when you do something, you got to understand that there's going to be a cost to you. And there was, obviously for me, I was out of work for 3 years after all this ended.
Yeah. Sometimes doing the right thing is harder.
It's expensive.
But it looks like from the SEC filing, the co-owners were supporting him, and they knew shit was going on, and they were just all like, "Hey, make some money." And as you said, no.
Yeah. So I decided that my father was worked on Wall Street. My maternal grandfather worked on Wall Street. None of them had ever gotten in trouble. I didn't want to be the first, and it's. I wanted my father, who was still alive back then. I wanted my father to be proud of me. I want my kids to be proud of me. I want my wife to sit there and say, "Yeah, you're not so bad." So you wind up putting yourself in those kind of sticky situations.
There you go. And now you got a book out of it. So
I do.
It kind of all works out in the end. And hopefully a movie, because these usually make great movies of corporate espionage.
From your lips to God's ears, and to Spielberg's phone.
There you go. Let's get Michael Douglas in here. I mean, it's so very Wall Streetish.
Gordon Gekko, come on.
Gordon Gekko, yeah, there you go.
But
and people love these movies, especially with FBI and Wires and Intrigue and all that stuff. You go through this whole journey that probably not a lot of people get to do, and you tell the story in the book of what it's like to wear a wire, and that's got to be just a weird thing, wearing a wire. No matter, even if you're not meeting with John Gotti,
it's pretty surreal.
Yeah. And what does it feel like, or what's the mindset? If you can see a little bit of that.
It's, first of all, let me just say it's not a wire. It's not what you see in mob movies and things like that. It could be a tie clasp, but it could be, it could be a number of different things.
Oh, really?
You'll never know. Could be a belt buckle.
So you don't rip open someone's shirt and they got a whole mess of.
Okay. So I'm sitting there at that first meeting, and after I agree to wear the wire, then all of a sudden they're teaching me. They take my phone, they're plugging in all their direct, their direct dial numbers, and if you need this, if anything ever happens, we'll get somebody near, to you right away. And finally, they said, "Do you have any questions?" And I feel like an idiot for this one, but I'm going to share it. And I look at them and I say, "Do they have to shave your chest to put a wire on?" and everybody breaks up laughing, saying, "It's not like the movies." And I'm like,
"Really?
Okay, yeah, all right." I shouldn't have said that. I should have thought before I said that one.
I'm going to go be a federal witness if I don't have to shave my stuff. That's just where I drew the line on my integrity. No, that's kidding. Yeah. So you go through this whole series. Imagine you had to appear in court and testify against.
Nope, never did, because they all pled guilty.
They all pled guilty. There you go. Well, that makes it easier. And then the finally the lead bad guy offs himself. So it makes it a little bit easier to round about the book and close it up.
Yeah, he had actually disappeared and checked out of the whole place.
Did he run off, or did he?
He checked himself into the psychiatric ward at Bellevue Hospital. At the beginning of February 2014, so just 10 years ago.
You say that was the bad thing. I've been there every week. Every weekend.
Yeah, I had a cousin who was a nurse there, and she told great stories.
Was her name Miss Ratchet? No, I'm just kidding. I had to do it. One flew over the cuckoo's nest joke.
But so he did that. Then he went into rehab in a very fancy rehab place in Connecticut where his mother lived.
It only works for people who do drugs that are movie stars, doesn't it? It doesn't work when you're up to $350 million. I think it's. But he had
access to all that money, and he squirreled a lot of it away. So then he moves down to Charleston, South Carolina. All right, and he starts up all over again. Now, I talked to a lot of, in the course of writing the book, I talked to some of the people that he made friends with down there. And I said, "So how did you meet Alex?" And they said, "I met him at a card game." Now, at this point, Alex would have been 28, 27. And, it's a bunch of, guys in their 40s, 50s, sitting there playing cards. And, they say, "Well, that's interesting, Alex. What do you do for a living?" And Burns sat there and said, "I'm a retired hedge fund manager from New York."
Retired.
Didn't say anything, and he started all over again. He started swindling people.
Wow. Some of the, what's it? Snake doesn't change its colors. There you go.
Yeah.
What do you hope people take away from your book?
A couple of things. One, I hope they decide to buy it. That's my primary. But no, actually, just what I tell my kids, when you're confronted with something that's really bad,
Mm-hmm.
And, stealing $350 million, I believe, qualifies as really bad. When you're confronted with something that's really bad and you are forced to make a decision,
Mm-hmm.
you're never going to regret doing the right thing.
Oh.
And it's kind of that, in the cartoons from the 60s and the 70s where they had the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the old shoulder, going, steal it, and the angel going, don't you dare, don't touch it. Side with the angel, you're going to feel better in the long run.
There you go. I know that there's some people who've done whistleblower stuff on the government, and they've lost everything. They've taken, they've sometimes it's been on the wrong side. I think of a couple major whistleblowers, but you're able to live with yourself. But the other thing is if you listen to the devil on your shoulder and said, the money's good, it's a good job, you might lose income for 3 years. There's just. But turn a blind eye, you would have probably been rolled up in the thing once the FBI showed up and raided the place.
Yeah, I mean, I probably would.
Like I probably would. Worse to do, anyways.
Yeah, I was managing, one of the accounts through which a lot of the money came in and went out, for unintended purposes. Yeah, so it was quite the journey. Would I do it again? I'm not sure. Let me go back on my own advice. I would help, but I'm not sure I would go through and do the covert stuff. The whistleblower thing. Maybe it's just me. I have a little bit of an issue with this whole whistleblower thing because there's a small community of people who are trying to make money off of the people who take the risk and put their lives and their livelihoods in jeopardy. And in many cases, not mine, but in many cases, their lives in jeopardy. And, they'll sit there and, praise you, day in and day out, to the highest, order. And but they're really only just trying to get a piece of the reward. Huh.
Is that the attorneys involved, or is there a whistleblower reward system or something?
Yeah, there's a whistleblower reward system. The FBI has one.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, the SEC has a big one, and everybody reads about, people getting these $150 million rewards. That's really, really rare. And it has to be money that they've taken back, that they've recovered. They'll give you a percentage of that.
Doesn't sound like they're able to recover much of this since
they didn't recover. They didn't recover shit in the Southport Lane thing.
Big paper float.
Yeah, they had a lot of losses. I mean, these guys were taking the money and, doing the private jet thing, which, why is it all these guys, when they sit there and, rip off, do a big rip off, they all start flying private jets out of nowhere. It's amazing.
You got to keep the look at the appearances. That's part of the scam.
It's
part of the grift,
Yeah.
What was that movie, that great movie in the 90s or whatever, The Grifters? You ever see that movie?
Oh, God, yeah. Actually, it went back to the 70s with Angelica Huston and I forget who else. But, that was a great movie.
Yeah. And you're right. There was the original one before that, huh? But the scene where he brings the guy into the Texas stock firm and they're putting on the show with the great looking firm. And, he goes to the door. I'll never forget. He goes to the door and he opens it. He's like, come here, see these stock computers. And, it's in, behind the door is just an empty office. And it's just the putting on of airs and all the stuff that goes into it.
Southport Lane was a really interesting place. They actually gave it some thought ahead of time. Maybe they were actually going to try to be a real firm. First time I walked in, now again, as I said, my father worked on Wall Street. My grandfather worked on Wall Street. I've been in a lot of Wall Street firms growing up, and so they all kind of have a certain similar air to them, decorative style, and there tends to be the real quiet part. Then there's the trading floor, which is noisy. Southport Lane had a gorgeous office. On the wall were framed old stock certificates, and it was made to look like old money. And they had a trading floor down the middle of they had a whole floor, 350 Madison Avenue in New York, which is prime real estate in Midtown. So I mean, they made it look as if they were old money.
Yeah, it's always keeping appearances because The way, you fake you got money, we live in this real world, a really weird world, especially with Instagram, I think helped create some of it. But, you can go do this thing for I think it's like $100 or $150 in LA, and you can go down and have your picture taken in a staged private jet. And it looks like
I've wondered about that. Yeah. I've wondered about that when you see all that, You said they go, he can't be making that.
Yeah, he can't be making that at all. And that's really wild. Let's give people a .com. Where can people find you on the interwebs and get to know you better?
At www.rdbailey.com.
There you go.
Bailey.
There you go. And thank you, Richard, for coming on the show. This has been really fun and interesting. I'm intrigued. I love to see it in a movie.
You read the reviews. There's a lot of people who say that, but
Definitely.
Let's hope.
Let's hope. There you go. Thanks to my audience for tuning in. Order up wherever fine books are sold. Pirate Cove, an insider's account of the infamous Southport Lane scandal. Available wherever fine books are sold. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1 on the TikTokity, and Chris Voss Facebook.com. Be sure to support the show, share it with your friends and neighbors, and be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.